welcome back to another edition of Bailey Price Media Live.
Bailey Price Media, I like it.
What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another edition of Bailey Price Media Live. Today, I got a great show for you. There's all kind of Seahawks news going on, so I had to bring on the man, none other than 9-year NFL veteran, former Seahawk, and Virginia alum Ray Roberts joins the show today. Can't wait to have him on. We're going to discuss the Seahawks trading Geno Smith to the Raiders. We're also going to discuss the Seahawks trading Metcalf to the Steelers and signing Sam Darnold. Whether that's a rebuild or a reload, we're going to discuss that as well. The Seahawks also re-signed Ernest Jones. We're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss with Big Ray. I got to get his take on Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. I do a Colorado show with Matt McChesney, so I got to get Big Ray's take on Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and how he feels about them in the NFL draft, and so much more. If you're watching, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and become a member of the Bailey Price Media Army. We appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in the chat below. I appreciate you all tuning in. Without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in 9-year NFL veteran, Virginia alum, Big Ray Roberts. Ray, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, bud?
How you doing? I can't thank you enough for joining, man. Happy Tuesday.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I love the I'm a big music dude, and so like your intro music has a nice little head bounce.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. I'm glad you like it. Shout out to my buddy of mine.
The bass line drop was pretty dope. So
I appreciate that, man. And I can't thank you enough for joining. And let's get right into it. I got to ask you, what's going on with the Seahawks, man? They're making a lot of different moves. This is the first time I've seen the Seahawks make this kind of moves in a long, long time. They obviously have traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers, and DK signed a large contract to Pittsburgh. They traded Geno Smith to the Raiders, and he reunites with Pete Carroll. And the Seahawks have also signed Sam Darnold. Big Ray, I got to ask you, for Seattle, is this a rebuild or a reload? How do you feel?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you use those two phrases, because as I was thinking about coming on today, the thing I was trying to decide was, you know, I use a different word. Is this a reboot or a rebuild? And initially, it looked like it was going to be a rebuild because you got rid of Geno, and I don't think they were looking to get rid of Geno. I think they were surprised that he didn't accept the offer that they extended to him. I think it was like 2 years at probably like around $40 million plus a year. I think he was looking for 3 years. 2 years still kind of puts you kind of in that kind of lame duck area. But then also I do think that there's something about him that wanted to get back to Pete Carroll. And so that kind of worked out for him. And then, you know, the whole DK thing, the releasing Tyler Lockett, like it just seemed as if the sky was falling. And I'm usually like a guy that tries to see the positive sides of things, but man, I felt myself trying to catch the sky too. I was like, man, I have no idea what they're doing. And I'm pretty well connected to the team. You know, I do the broadcast, you know, I'm at practice a lot. I know a lot of the players, and I just had nothing for people, man. I didn't know what they were doing, but I think, you know, signing Sam Darnold, I think they had to have a kind of a good idea that they could get him signed. And, you know, to me, it's probably like a lateral move for cheaper and for a younger player. And if there was one thing I would say is that Geno probably just his overall football knowledge, like how to be a football player, is probably better than Sam Darnold's. Right. But if you can get the running game going, and we can talk about that, the offensive line giving him protection, you know, I think you can build something around him, around play action passes and the QBX offense and this, that, and the other thing. So I was a little skeptical at first, but I'm a little bit more optimistic today.
Absolutely. And yeah, I definitely was a little alarmed and skeptical. I think many Seahawks fans are in alarm for sure. I was a big Geno guy. I was surprised that they ended up trading him, but I understand when it comes to contracts, that's just the business of the NFL. I think them bringing in Sam Darnold, people aren't very high on Sam Darnold despite him winning 14 games with the Vikings in his first real opportunity in a good spot. I think the 49ers probably should have kept him if we're being real, but that's a different conversation. But yeah, I think them acquiring Sam Darnold, cheaper, younger, obviously, they obviously have to build around them. That brings me to my next question for you. We've seen several offensive line signings, transactions, but we haven't seen the Seahawks in any of these yet. What right now? What are the biggest needs for Seattle going into the free agency realm, and what are they going to do now headed into the draft? Go ahead.
I would say, Bailey, both of us played in the trenches, and as much as this game wants to make itself a quarterback's league, it is still all about what the dudes do up front. And if you can't protect, I don't care who the quarterback is, you're probably not going to have the success you wanted. Even the Chiefs, who kind of managed throughout the year when they got to the Super Bowl, the big difference was in the trenches. They were just getting smashed. And so Seattle came into the offseason the same way they went into last offseason, the same way they went into the offseason before that, with questions at their, especially in their interior offensive line, the two guards in the center. And I don't know that they've answered any of those questions. Lincoln Tomlinson just signed somewhere else, so he won't be back. He was a starting left guard last year. Has played a million games in NFL, but I think his age had caught up with him. Oluwatimbe is the starting center right now. There are some flaws in his game as it relates to just his explosion off the ball. He's plenty strong enough, big enough, smart enough. He's a good leader, all that kind of stuff. But just if you want to run the ball in that zone concept, you need a center that can move people. I don't know that he's proven that he can do that yet. And then the right guard spot with Bradford that they had starting there last year and then rotating in the two rookies they had last year, that spot was just never settled. And if you know anything about playing in this league, it's hard to have a competition for a position on the offensive line during the season. It's just too much going on, too much to learn, too much chemistry you need between the offense and the different players on the offensive line. And so I don't know that they've solved that problem either. And so now you look into this free agent market. There's been several guys, Fries, Smith at the Chiefs. There's been a few dudes that the Seahawks should maybe they were in the mix and just didn't offer enough money or whatever. But for whatever reason, they haven't been able to pick up one of those veteran dudes. I do know that John Snyder doesn't tend to do stuff in the first week or so of free agency. And he also has kind of an aversion to overspending for guys in the interior offensive line. So I think some of that is going to have to be challenged. Hopefully Coach McDonald, his approach and vision for the team can kind of change that a little bit. There is a pretty deep draft market at guard. So there's some dudes you can pick up, early and also like that second day. There's some guys that can play. So maybe they're kind of leaning towards that space. And then that's going to require the new coaching staff to be good at developing players and developing their linemen to be ready to play, plug and play if you want to go to this reboot space. If you're going to go to the rebuild space, then they're probably going to be really on the cheap in the interior offensive line. And it's probably going to be a couple-year process to kind of get the returns that they want.
And that brings me to my next point. This draft, like you mentioned, I think is pretty loaded on the offensive and defensive line. Not a quarterback-friendly draft. This is definitely a draft for the trenches, so to speak. Seattle holds a 18th overall pick in the first round, 5 of the first 92 picks. And how do you think they can really address, like you mentioned, that interior offensive line at pick 18? I don't know who can fall to them. It's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of unknowns right now, at least with the top 5 or 10 picks, as we see a lot of crazy moves in free agency. But how do you feel about Seattle headed into the draft, 5 of the first 92 picks?
Well, the thing that I like is that they did acquire some capital, and things they can do. They went from having one of the worst cap spaces to probably having like maybe the fifth or sixth ranked cap space. And then they acquired a ton of draft picks. And the good thing is that second, third, fourth round space is where John Snyder has done his most damage as a general manager, president of a team. Sure. He does a good job of finding talent in that space. And so, or they're gonna use those pieces to trade up and trade down and try to acquire more things. They're the big guard from Alabama, Booker. He's more of a, like, if you had to compare it to like a receiver, how some receivers have moves and jukes and other guys are just more straight line runners. He's more of a straight line player. So it kind of lends itself to being good in like gap schemes and power schemes. And Kubiak's offense is more of a zone, especially heavy outside zone. And so some people have all these metrics and data and all this stuff are saying like, oh, well, they can't do the outside zone. I'm like, well, you're forgetting about coaching and player development. There's a lot of things I couldn't do in college that I was able to do in the NFL once I got to spend time doing it and being coached to it. So he's a guy like the dude from I think it's South Dakota that really killed it at the Senior Bowl. Love him, man, because the thing I like about him is that he fits the mentality of this team, which is like bring on all challenges. So at the Senior Bowl, he played every position along the offensive line. And because he was doing the most damage, a lot of the defensive linemen were saying, like, I want to go against him because they're trying to prove themselves against who they thought was the best dude there. And so that says a lot from a guy who wasn't in a Power 5 conference. And it says a lot about his ability because he dominated the Senior Bowl in the one-on-one drills, in the game, like in the team situations. Like he really dominated. So he showed that he could play with big SEC talent, big Power 5 talent football players. And I love his suddenness. Like he has a little bit more explosion. His lateral movement is a little better. So I like him. I don't know if that's a dude that they would take a chance on at 18. But if he's around in that second round, and I think they may one of the draft picks they got was like the 92nd pick in the second round. If they can like move up to that spot, up a little bit and get him, I think he will be a good get for the Seahawks. And so the offensive line, regardless of what has happened in free agency, receiver, release one receiver, traded quarterback, got a new quarterback, you'll probably get another receiver. None of it works if you don't have guys like you and me in the middle making room and space and time for these guys to do what they do.
Absolutely. And Ray, I completely agree with you. I got to ask you about the tackle position, right tackle specifically. Abe Lucas obviously has been dealing with the injury last year and a half, so to speak. Obviously, they had Stone Forsythe playing as well, Big Stone playing as well. But one player I got to ask you about, I don't know if he'll fall to 18, Big Will Campbell from LSU. I think is a hell of a player that they could plug and play at right tackle. I don't know if he's going to fall to 18. We'll kind of wait and see, how the earlier picks play out. Another guy that I would shout out for the interior group, Jackson Slater. He's actually from Washington. He went to Newport High School. Comes from Sacramento State. Obviously had a pretty good Senior Bowl, showing out as well in the one-on-ones. That's somebody I think Seattle actually met with at the Senior Bowl, and somebody that Seattle could look at possibly day 3 as well. But going back to the right tackle position, how do you feel about Abe Lucas and the future of that position for the Hawks?
Well, it's been a mystery of what exactly the injury was that he had, and then also what was the surgical procedure that he had. I know throughout the season, the team had a certain timeline when they wanted him back, but then his doctors had a different timeline. And so then at some point, the team just kind of leaned into what the timeline was that his doctors had. And but then watching from a lot of, Abe posts a lot of stuff of him working out and, moving and all this kind of stuff. It looks like he's in pretty good spot to come back and play. The biggest fear was if people were wondering if this was a chronic thing. And so without having any information, it's kind of hard to say. But when Abe is healthy, and Abe is able to play, I think Abe is one of the top 4 or 5 right tackles in the league. He's a big, strong guy. When I scouted him coming out of college, I'm like, He just seems to be a dude that likes to kind of get in the way, but he's not really finishing blocks. And then he got here, and he was like, I mean, this dude was like driving guys back in the dirt, and it just. I was like, man, the Seahawks got a steal in the third round. This dude was a first-round talent that, for whatever reason, slipped to the third round. And so if he's able to be healthy and start the offseason and good and not have any setbacks, then the right tackle spot is set. There's been conversations about, hey, why don't you move Abe into the guard spot? But I don't think people understand how different the positions are. And they think like 5 big guys up front, they're all interchangeable, and they're just not that. I've had this argument with so many people. And so I think Abe is a right tackle. That's a right tackle. That's a right tackle. That should always be the right tackle. And so I do think they need to like address, find a guard that plays guard and put him in there. The guy from LSU, Will Campbell, I think you said his name was. Yeah. Watched him during the combine, moves well, but man, I'm just telling you, like it. I know they say the SEC is like the big dog of the big dogs, but it's still not the NFL. I don't care. I don't care how they say it. So like his arm length concerns me, and he has narrow shoulders, and so like in this league, if a pass rusher can get to your body, man, he can like do a lot of damage. And you even though there's great football players in the SEC, every week you're not playing against a dude that is an NFL guy. They might be a good college football player, but it ain't like every single dude you playing against is going to have a long, prosperous career in the NFL. It's just 2 totally different games. And so that does concern me a little bit. And then, some people say, well, you can move him inside. Yeah, I guess you can. Connor Williams did that. Like he was a big-time tackle at Texas, and he was built kind of like Will, shorter arms, shorter stature. Moved him into guard, did okay, but then he really excelled at center, and then he got hurt. And then, now he's retired. So there is a space for that. But I don't know that drafting him like at 18 to kind of go like, well, let's see what we got is the type of player you want. You want to do where what you got, what he can do, and you know that he can excel at what it is you're asking him to do. So that's why I would lean more towards, if you're going to get a guard in the first round, get a guard. get one of the top ranked guards in that spot. And then the left tackle spot, Charles Cross. Charles made huge jumps this year. Like Charles is a guy that didn't usually play with a bunch of power, super athletic, slide left and right, get his hands on guys. But when it came to playing with power in the run game, just didn't. In college, he played a 2-point stance the whole time. And so, but last year, man, he made some strides in the running game, and then he didn't slide back, but the power in the pass rush, so the bull rush is the thing that kind of is his weakness in the pass protection. But this dude consistently last year was grading out. And if you follow the Pro Football Focus stuff, some people use that as their Bible. I don't, but I do use it as information. He was constantly grading out in the top 5 or 10 tackles in the league. So they have people on the edges. They just need to get some good players. They don't have to be all pro Pro Bowl type players, but they need some good workman-like, get it done players in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely need some dudes in the middle. But I am like you mentioned, and I'll just say this: I am a big Abe Lucas guy. Comes from Washington State, played with Kate Bear, who was a high school teammate of mine.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm a big Abe Lucas guy, and if he can become fully healthy, he, like we saw when he actually had a chance to play and not be hurt, he was a hell of a player for the Hawks. Sticking on the Hawks and some good news, they actually re-signed Ernest Jones, 3 years, $33 million extension. We saw Ernest Jones come in last year at linebacker. They always had the Dodson, who they ended up cutting, I believe, after starting all the games. But Ernest Jones really took over coming from the Rams. I think he's a hell of a player. Glad they got him back. How do you feel about the signing, Big Ray?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Throughout the season, you had, I think it was Knight and Dotson, who you thought were going to be the 2 inside linebackers. And they were smaller, built more for pass defense type linebackers, which is great if you're playing teams that are just dropping back and throwing it all the time. But then teams found out that the Seahawks couldn't stop the run. And then you go like, oh, man, like these 210, 220-pound linebackers just ain't getting it done, and you're trying to run around blocks and make tackles, and it wasn't happening. And so to their credit, to Coach McDonald's credit and to John Snyder's credit, man, they just said, hey, this is not who we thought they were, and we need to do something else, in this position. And so I think Knight was the rookie they brought in. But Ernest Jones is a man's man playing linebacker. This dude takes on blocks. He doesn't run around them. He is very good at finding his way to the running back and making tackles. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of missed tackles for him. Like, there was a play against San Francisco, and he was one-on-one with Christian McCaffrey in the hole. And a lot of times Christian McCaffrey makes that person miss, and it's like a 15, 20-yard gain. And it was a 3rd and 2 or whatever, but he stopped them in the hole for 3rd and 2, which was a big deal because they were giving up 60, 70, 80-yard runs before he came here. And so it was like a professional football middle linebacker play and tackle. And so it didn't look big in the stat book. It wasn't like, but on the broadcast team, we all looked at each other like, yeah, that's what we were missing. We're missing that dude. And then another endorsement of him was when he was in with the Rams and Bobby Wagner was there. He learned a lot from Bobby Wagner. And then when Aaron Donald retired, in his retirement speech, one of his comments was, now I'm giving the defense to Ernest Jones, because he felt like Ernest Jones was that guy. And for whatever reason, the Rams didn't want to pay him, so he got traded to the Titans. And then I felt like the Titans were kind of offloading people to get draft picks, and it just worked out for Seattle to get him. Glad they re-signed him. He's a very stable dude, and he wanted to be here. He talked all season long about even during the season, or asked him about what's going to happen at the end of the season. He's like, I've wanted to be in Seattle. Even before he went to the Titans, Seattle was one of the teams that he wanted to see if he can get traded to. So I'm happy that he's here. He's a good leader on the team. He's a good stabilizer in the middle. When he came, the defense, along with big Leonard Williams, it just took a step forward because he was in there.
Absolutely. And I got to ask you about this defense headed into next year. I think Ernest Jones is going to be a key staple in that linebacker position. How do you feel about the defense being led by Mike McDonald? First year under McDonald, up and down, so to speak. I think we saw a little bit of struggles early in McDonald's tenure, but as we got towards the end of the year, some improvement. How do you feel about the defense headed into next season?
You know what? I thought that it probably went the way that you thought it would go, because you're just a new coach with a different philosophy and a different way to play it, different messaging. And so it took, I think, the guys a while to kind of grasp on to what it was they've been asked to do and trust it. Like, that was the big part. And that, to me, that was a big reason why they were struggling earlier, because they're saying like, hey, defensive tackle, we want you to be in the B gap. And then he's in the B gap going like, looking at the C gap like, I don't know about this. Maybe I should be over here. And then in that indecision, you get covered up. The linebacker can't get through. It's an 80-yard touchdown. And so there was a point during the season where they asked Leonard Williams, what did he think was going on? And he said, well, I think guys are trying to do too much. And to his credit, this is what leadership is. To his credit, he didn't go like some obscure, like, oh, well, we need to do or they need to do. He said, this is what I've done that I need to correct. And he's like, from this day forward, I promise you, I'm going to do what they're asking me to do. And from that day forward, they were a totally different defense because they bought into what Coach McDonald was asking them to do. They found more players that were in the positions that they're supposed to be in. They were playing the way Witherspoon was just playing. This dude is just playing out of his mind. Then you get Ernest Jones in, and then Leonard Williams, to me, just is probably one of the most, I don't want to say underrated, but the accolades that he got at the end of the year didn't represent the player that he was. But he should have been first-team All-Pro. He had better stats than all of the defensive tackles that made it above him. He was double-teamed in the top 2 or 3 defensive tackles in the league and still had double-digit sacks and interception for a touchdown and like all these other kind of stuff. And so I love what they have in the middle. And, they just re-signed Jaron Reed, who's a good veteran football player, the last remaining connection to the Legion of Boom on this team. Byron Murphy, I think, it was a good learning season for him. In college, like I said, you can get away with a lot of things because you're playing against the talent gap can be so big, even in the SEC. And when he got here, all the double teams he was getting, all the different looks that guys were giving him, I don't want to say he struggled. He just wasn't productive the way you thought he would be productive. Look for a big jump for him the next year. And then I will say, probably to me, the thing that's going to really unlock the defense for the long term is what they do on the edge. Because Uchenna Nwosu got hurt in the preseason and was out the rest of the season. Derek Hall and Mafe, good at the beginning of the year, but then faded at the end of the year. Like they're in the top as far as number of sacks and pressures on the quarterback. They were in the top 4 or 5 each week in the first 6 or 7 weeks, and then they faded. And I don't know what created the fade, but they need those guys to stay on top of the game to really finish off the defense. And then I think they're in great shape, man. I think this defense is going to be ready to rock and roll. And in the Seahawks locker room or building, they have a sign that says, we want to play like no one. We want to play a style that no one wants to play. And I think they're in that place on defense. And they just need that complementary piece on offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I am very optimistic when it comes to Seattle. Obviously, their secondary have 2 solid pieces in the secondary at corner, and the safeties are locked up as well. Linebacker, they just brought back Ernest Jones. Defensive line, you just gave a great breakdown. Now we got to go ship back to the offensive side.
Yeah.
You just traded away, or you cut one of your receivers after 10 years, Tyler Lockett, and shout out to Tyler Lockett. You trade DK to the Steelers. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba. You got Bobo. Who do you think? Who are they going to bring in at receiver? What are you thinking? What's the future of that position?
Yeah, man, that's a tough one to figure out because this is a bad year to need receivers because normally that's been the deepest position in the draft. This year is very top heavy, like the top 1 or 2 guys, and then it kind of falls off after that. And then in the free agency, you have a lot of veteran dudes. I guess Adams just signed, but you had Diggs out there and a couple other players. But they're dudes that are kind of past their prime. You're not expecting them to come in and be dynamic like DK was. At 27 years old and 230 pounds, running like a ghost out there. So I think the thing that they can maybe lean their, kind of like hang their hat on is that the Buffalo Bills didn't have a big dynamic. I don't think they would even have a receiver that you would even match to JSN. The 49ers have a bunch of like 2A play like receivers and not all like a number 1 receiver. You know what I'm saying? And so, and there was one other team I forgot. There was 3 teams that don't have like a big time Justin Jefferson. But they have a bunch of like 1Bs and 1Cs, and the Packers are that way, And so I think you can be successful if you get JSN some players like that, a guy that can play the slot, tight end that can be a threat, in Kubiak's offense, they do a lot of just 2 receivers, tight end sets, and so the tight end becomes a viable part of the passing game. So they can create passing threats that way versus having to have because JSN to me is a number 1 receiver in the right offense. He's not a dude that you're going to match up 1-on-1 and he's just going to flat out outrun someone down the field. But he is a dude that is great at running routes, getting open, catching the ball, yards after the catch, that kind of stuff. But you got to scheme him open sometimes. And so with that, you're going to need some receivers that are willing to make that sacrifice to run the routes to get him open, but then also can be productive so that you take the pressure off of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tough year to be a team in need of a receiver. Going back to this draft, Seahawks at pick 18, I've had Super Bowl champion quarterback Sean King on the show, who's a big Matthew Golden from Texas guy. He's a big believer in him. Obviously, he ran, I believe, 4.29 at the scouting combine or something, ran pretty damn quick. But Sean King is a big believer in both the Texas wide receivers coming out. Any chance Seattle goes receiver at pick 18, or do you still see them going interior offensive line or defensive line? I think there's a lot of pass rushers coming out as well that are solid.
Yeah, well, their approach to the draft is they hardly ever draft for need. They normally draft the best player that they have on their board. And so, however, that shakes down at 18. So, we were talking to John Snyder about this a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, well, if there's a guard at 18, but there's a defensive tackle that we have graded higher than him who we feel can have a greater impact, we're probably going to go with the defensive tackle. Like they're not going to pass up a dynamic player that they have rated higher for a player of need. So if if they have a first round grade on him, I doubt that the tight end from Tennessee, from Penn State, will drop that far. But I would imagine if he did, that he would probably be a guy that they would go after, because the tight end is a big part of this offense, and he's like the second coming of a George Kittle type of a player. You know what I'm saying? And so so I could see them doing something like that. If they stayed at 18, which I don't know that they will, but if they stayed at 18, I don't know that they would select a guard there unless it's a guard that is head over heels above all the other positions of impact that they have. And that's going to frustrate the Seahawks fans, because they want to see you overdraft or overpay for a player, but that just has not been their mode here as long as John Snyder has been here. I do think, though, like, even though it looked like they didn't have a plan, and I was questioning that as well, the fact that they came through with Sam Darnold tells me that they do have a plan. Just because we don't know it yet, we haven't seen it yet, they have a plan. And I think even, trading away DK, as much as I think they wanted him, the fact that they started changing what their request was for to trade him tells me that they were comfortable letting him go because they have a plan. And if they had no plan, they could have just held their cards and said, hey, man, you got 1 year on your left on the contract. If you want to hold out a training camp, all that, they could have gone through that whole rigmarole, but they decided, like, okay, well, we asked maybe too high at one point, we'll lower it a little bit. And then they ended up getting, maybe a win-win for both people out of the situation.
Absolutely. And Seattle Seahawks fans listening, there is a plan. I think that's just something that we need to remember. If they didn't sign Sam Darnold, I think we should sit here and be in serious alarm, like, what are they doing? Big Ray, going back to the rest of the draft, Tennessee Titans hold the number 1 overall pick. I don't know what they're doing. It seemed like a lock that they're going to pick Abdul Carter with the number 1 overall pick. Now there's some rumors going back to quarterback. Obviously, I believe their president of player ops said they wanted to draft a generational talent with that number 1 overall pick. So we'll see. Cleveland holds the number 2 overall pick. Obviously, just gave Myles Garrett a massive extension after he requested a trade. Andrew Berry, the GM, said no, and then they ended up extending him. Giants are at 3. Vrabel and New England are at 4. How do you feel about these top 5 to 10 picks? Any guys that stick out to you, and any prediction on the order?
Yeah, well, the thing to me, man, is like even though there are hits, Jaden Daniels obviously like elevated the Commanders last year, but that's really rare, to be honest with you. Like that you're going to get these hits in the first round, and some people have like recency bias and just think like every person that gets drafted in the first round is going to be a dynamic player. But if you look through the history of time, that's just not the case, And so you have to be, you got to kind of hedge your bets to your best knowledge and your best research. Especially when you're going with that number 1 pick, it's hard if you think that there's a quarterback that is going to elevate your team, because it's such a quarterback-driven league right now. It'd be hard for me to draft a defensive end pass rusher over him. Like it would just be hard. And this Cam Ward dude just sounds like an amazing guy. I mean, to me, he's a Pete Carroll type of dude. Like Pete Carroll loves players that were counted out, that have overcome a lot, that shows a lot of resilience and those types of things. Those are the types of players he tended to draft here in Seattle. So Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Michael Bennett, like a lot of players that he brought into this organization were guys that other people might go like, I don't know. But he looked at the life story, like what is this dude going through? And Cam Ward wasn't drafted. Wasn't recruited heavily. Went to maybe junior college first, and then Washington State, and then Miami. And every place he went, he killed it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of hard to say like, okay, we're going to pass that guy up to draft a quarterback. A defensive end pass rusher, number 1 overall, because there's so many ways you can take a guy like him out of the game. You can put a tight end over there. You can put a running back over there. There's just so much that you can sometimes limit their impact on the game. Doesn't mean they can't have stats, but when it comes to winning and losing, are they making as big an impact as a quarterback would? So I like the Cam Ward kid. He's a little bit cocky and arrogant and all that kind of stuff, but man, and they say that about the Sanders kids and but you know what? Like I had a coach tell me that one time before, like you're pretty arrogant and all this stuff, and I'm just like, dude, you can't get to this level and not have that in you.
That's what I'm saying. Don't you want that's what I was going to ask you. Don't you want your quarterback to be arrogant and brash a little bit? Like,
yeah. Like, I mean, I know there's a limit to it. You don't want someone to be a jerk about it. But man, if you can't get to this level and play at that high a level and be considered that great, if you don't have some cockiness and arrogance about you, like, yeah, confidence is one thing, but man, you gotta be able to walk into a room and go like, I am that dude. I am the dude in here amongst all the dudes. You know what I'm saying? And so that takes a little bit of arrogance and that to go with it, overconfident and stuff. So I don't buy into a lot of the conversations around, like, especially Shedeur Sanders. The dude has his confidence in himself, sheds light on other people's lack of confidence in themselves, and that makes them uncomfortable. Great point. And because they get uncomfortable, they have to figure out a way to speak to being uncomfortable, and the only way they can do that is to call out the other person versus calling out themselves. And so, I can't say that I agree with all the stuff and the messaging that Coach Prime does and, everything, but I will say this, that his sons are, have been really good football players. At the end of the day, you can not like a whole lot about them, but they get results and they play really good football. So, I don't know where he would fall in the first round, but just because you're not in the first round doesn't mean that people don't value you and you're not going to have an opportunity to be a starting quarterback in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from the hate that comes at Shedeur, I do a Colorado show with Matt McChesney, and I will tell you, we call the Colorado fans the prime sexuals. 1 week when Colorado wins, Coach Prime is Mount Rushmore is the greatest ever. When they lose, they want Coach Prime fired and they're going at everybody. So it can't please anybody when it comes to that. When it comes to Shedeur being arrogant, like you mentioned, I think you put it best. Not over the top, but you want your quarterback to be like that. You got to have that confidence. I think Shedeur's confidence kind of rubs people the wrong way. When it comes to the rumors or the so-called quarterback coach that said that, or coming out of the sex scouting combine, I think Shedeur has been around these certain type of people this entire life because his dad's Coach Prime or his dad's Deion Sanders. And, I don't think he reacts in the same way that other players may react to meeting with these, high executive people. That's just me.
I would just say this, like, imagine being the son of Deion Sanders and you don't have that type of confidence. Like I think people would beat that up more than they are about him having too much confidence. You can't play for Deion, be the son of Deion, live with Deion, be raised by Deion, and then come out and be a timid, scared person. You embrace that attention, and there's just not a lot of young people that are prepared to do that the way that he was. And then because even if you look at Travis Hunter, Travis Hunter does it in his own way. Like, he's probably, to me, the most dynamic player in the draft. And he has his moments of, like, doing his arrogant thing, but he does it a little bit more subtly. But both of those dudes are really, really good football players. To me, there was all this talk about who should or should not win the Heisman. And for me, it's been Travis Hunter for the last 2 years.
Thank you, Big Ray. I agree with you, man.
If you're looking for the best football player, like, how can you say he's not the best football player? And some people go like, well, he didn't have all the best stats at receiver, and he didn't have the best stats at DB. I'm like, yeah, but combined, what other player had better stats than him doing both? Like, nobody, And so I like him. I can't wait to see how he embraces the challenge of being in the NFL and how teams decide to use him, and what the wear and tear is going to be on his body. I think that's something you could do for a period of time, but at some point, just for your own longevity in the league, you probably need to settle on one spot and kind of let that be your spot. But like I said, I can't say that I agree with everything that has come out of Colorado and how they've done everything. But when I just look at football players that I want on my team that get results, those two dudes get results. And so I would love to have them on my team.
Absolutely. And be covering these guys the last year that I have with Matt, just learning kind of the behind the scenes. I have Shador and Bucky's Deion Sanders' son, Deion Sanders Jr., Bucky, who runs Well Off Media. We've had him on the show weekly during the season, and we've kind of had a behind the scenes look at how they do it and whatever. The one thing I've learned about Shador, you can call him arrogant, whatever you want. Hell of a football player, tough as shit. And that's something I don't think people really talk about. He took a lot of hits at Colorado, a lot of hits, whether it's self-induced or not. I get he rolls back and drifts and whatever, but he also took a lot of just hits. And it's not like he cowered. He would get up and respond every single time. And that's the one thing about Shador. I think, depending on fit, we can kind of discuss that. Fit in the NFL draft, what team will draft him. It's kind of up in the air right now. We'll see what happens with free agency, whether Tennessee goes after Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, or end up drafting a Travis Hunter or Shador. Well, I'm a big believer in Shador. I don't get the hate around him. I think Travis Hunter, like you mentioned, best player in the draft, in my opinion, generational. I think he's a freaking unicorn. We've never seen anything like him or anyone do what he's done on a football field. Not saying that it can't be done. I think there's certain guys that are playing or are playing that could potentially play both ways. We've never seen it like this. 150 freaking snaps a game, all American level on both sides of the ball. I don't think we've ever seen that. But man, if you had to give like a good fit for Travis Hunter and Shador, do you think the Titans go quarterback? Do you think the Titans go receiver, or is it still up in the air for you until free agency pans out?
Yeah, I think the thing that's probably hurting Shador from the quarterback point of view is that there has been a lot of quarterback movement in free agency, and there's guys that have tape in this league, and it's easier to project how they may show up on your team than a college kid coming in. It's almost the same as the transfer portal now. Like you can predict. You see guys that have played on the college level versus guys coming from high school. So you're building your team around the portal, around proven players. And so I think that the quarterback movement has probably been more detrimental to Shador Sanders, going in the first round, especially early in the first round. Like I could see somebody, maybe taking him in the second round. Maybe it's a Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh still doesn't have a quarterback, and they're looking at Aaron Rodgers, and maybe Shador's a guy that can learn behind Aaron Rodgers. I don't know, but it's kind of hard to kind of find a space in there for him to be a first-round draft pick at quarterback in the NFL. But it only takes one team to fall in love with him. But I do. It doesn't. Like, this is the thing that kills me, Bailey, is that a lot of guys, it's a pride thing to be like the first pick in the draft.
For sure.
But, man, usually you're going to bad teams.
Right.
And the reason a lot of those teams are bad is either one, they don't have the players, or two, they don't have the coaching, or three, a combination of both of those. And so that's going to have a big impact on your ability to grow as a player, to be successful as a player. Even if you're a good player on a really bad team, people look at you and go like, but you're on a really bad team. You know what I'm saying? And so a guy like Shador, for me, it'd be better for him to go later in the draft to a team that maybe has a quasi-established quarterback where he can kind of grow into the position and be coached, really well, and those types of things. Because sometimes just, hey, I want to be the first pick just to be the first pick. Okay, you're going to go to the Titans. What have they done in the last 5-6 years? They haven't done anything. What quarterback other than Ryan Tannehill that you're going to say went there and killed it? It hasn't, they've been through a couple different coaching staffs, all that kind of stuff. So the Giants, the same way. Cleveland, the same way. The Patriots, maybe not so much. Then you start looking at those other teams. They don't need quarterbacks. Maybe the Saints at 9, but I don't know if they're looking to draft a quarterback. Shador Sanders at that spot. So it's I think he's probably like a someone trading up in the end of the first round or somewhere in that second round or second day that he'll be drafted.
Oh, okay. So a lot of people, because we've had a lot of debates on other shows that I do, whether Shador will be in the top 10. Personally, before Justin Fields signs with the Jets, I predicted that he would fall to 7 to the Jets. And I actually really liked him at 1 to Tennessee, and this is kind of my explanation for it. I think when it comes to Shador, if he were to go to a team that's not good, it's all about fit. I think if he goes to Cleveland, I think it's a really tough division. That's a really tough spot and a tough team for him to thrive. New York is also tough, but I'm more of a believer in Brian Daboll. I think he's a hell of a coach who we've seen them have success with Daniel Jones at quarterback. So I don't doubt that, but that's also a tough spot. New England, I think, is the best landing spot for Travis Hunter. If Travis Hunter isn't at 1, I think it should be 4 to New England. I think Mike Vrabel is the one coach in the NFL that has actually played on both sides of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't be afraid to let Travis do his thing. I don't think Travis is going to play 100% of the snaps both sides of the ball, but if he wants to, fuck it, why not, right? But I think I don't think Travis should fall below 4. I think that would be a good thing. I think that's criminal to him. I think he's the best player in this draft, and all the hate of, he's average on one side or whatever.
Well, I'll put it this way. Just
watch the tape on him.
Yeah, his ability to adjust to the ball, whether it's on defense or offense, is, to me, is off the charts. Like it's kind of like a Randy Moss was at receiver. Like you just throw it up there somewhere, he's gonna go get it. But he's doing that on both sides of the ball. His body control, in some of the interceptions he had, the way he had to contort his body and still be able to track the ball. And if you watch, a lot of his interception was still with his hands. It wasn't like into his body. He was still catching stuff away from the frame of his body. He just has like a gift that I don't think the average fan can really internalize exactly what it is they're watching. I do think though that he's gonna have to go somewhere where they're comfortable with him playing both sides of the ball, and it's gonna have to be a creative coach, not creative in like trying tricky stuff, but innovative coach to be able to use him on offense to get the best out of him. And so hopefully one of those staffs. I don't know if I would put that in New York. I don't know if I just haven't, from some of those teams I haven't seen it. And he's the type of dude, like, if his pride wasn't in the way, I want him to go somewhere where he can thrive, not somewhere where he's going to be frustrated and there's going to be a new coach every other year and a new offensive scheme and a new defensive scheme and players changing all around him, because that impacts your impact as well. And so I hope he goes to a place where he has a chance to really have his skill set flourish and also have the team have success so that he has a stable place to play.
Absolutely. And I'm going to show a clip of Travis Hunter on an interception, one of the most insane plays I've ever seen. But Travis Hunter, it was on 0 to 60, Matt and I show, we broke the story. Travis Hunter actually pays out of his own pocket in the Colorado's NIL collective, paying for some of his players, some of Colorado's players' scholarships, actually. One thing about Travis's character, he's a selfless dude. Only thing he cares about is football, video games, that's it. Like, he's the most down-to-earth human. He's not doing any stupid shit, no dumb partying or anything. Super down-to-earth. That's why I'm really confident in him and in his NFL potential type of character he is. But Big Ray, this was during Texas Tech. This was a free play that was called back, but this interception is one of the most insane plays I've ever seen. Travis is just he is next level. This is like, damn, like I'm telling you, Travis is a freak, man. I think him on the opposite of Christian Gonzalez in New England is probably the best fit for him. But nonetheless, Travis is a generational player. Big Ray, I got to ask you before I get you out of here on this fine Tuesday. I can't thank you enough for joining. Your Virginia Cavaliers. We got to talk a little football here, college football, before we get out of here. Virginia has signed 19 transfers from the transfer portal, as well as 19 high school recruits as well. Big Ray, I got to ask you, Virginia started spring practices on Monday, and as they get geared up for spring ball here, I believe they have their spring game on April 12th. How do you feel about Virginia headed into the new season with 19 new transfers, and what do they got to do to get to a bowl game this year under Tony Elliott?
Well, this is now, I think they have players on the team that can elevate the team. Now they need the coaches to elevate their coaching and really develop the dudes and, put them in a position to be successful. I will say, it took me a minute to kind of come around to the way the portal was working. I've always been a fan of the NIL thing, but I like the true nature of the name, image, likeness versus pay to play. And that's what it's turned into is pay to play. And Virginia was never a player in that game because our donor base is more of a wait and see donor base. And it's kind of hard to wait and see in this climate because if you're bringing in recruits and other teams are bringing in transfers, like you're already at a disadvantage. And so to our surprise, we had two donors, one right before the first portal opened, donated like $10 million to the football team and said, I want you to use this $10 million to restructure the football team. And then another donor said, I'm going to match up to $3 million. So whoever the other donations that came in, so you can maximize that and get $16 million going into this portal. And then they've done a really good job of actually using the money, kind of restructuring the offensive line. Like I've checked in already. I talked to the offensive line coach a lot, and I check into people that are around the team, and they're like, Ray, like the offensive line just looks totally different. They're bigger, they're more athletic, they're more dominant, and that's where we're struggling. And then we have a quarterback there from North Texas that they paid pretty good, who's a pretty dynamic passer. They got some good skill. We've always had some good skill dudes. We just haven't been able to hold up in the trenches. So it looks like to me, this coaching staff has no excuse. Bowl game should be the minimum. You know what I'm saying? They should really do some damage and make some moves because they have the players to do so now. Before they didn't. And not all of it, some people will say, well, was Tony Elliott ready or not? But if you rewind, he took the job after Bronco Mendenhall and his staff left right at the signing date. So when those guys left, a lot of the dudes they were recruiting left, and we can talk about how that ended up happening. So it kind of, and then the group that was hit the hardest doing that was the offensive line room. So we had, when Bronco left, there were 3 or 4 starters that transferred out to other schools. One went to Central Florida, one went to USC, another one went somewhere else. And so we were without starters, and so you had dudes that were probably developmental players having to start. And so then you just get crushed in all of that. And so now they've been able to reshape that room. And then you had the shooting where you had a couple guys shot and killed, and then a lot of dudes transferred away from the program during that time. And so, but during all of that time, through all those, most of Virginia's losses were by like 7 points or less. And so they were losing games in the middle 4. They'd give up a touchdown right before halftime and another score right out of the half. And then that would be the difference in the game. They lost like 3 or 4 fourth quarter leads. So they've been right at the door, but they haven't had the players to get them over the hump. Now they have those players. Now the coaching staff has to do what they get paid to do, which is put these dudes in a position to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think one thing about Virginia and their conference, I think they're in a very winnable conference, especially going forward. Who knows what Miami's doing with Carson Beck and the future of that, Bill Belichick and North Carolina now. There's just a lot of different pieces in the ACC. I know what Clemson's going to be like. Like, it's just a lot of different moving pieces. But I got to ask you, going back to the transfer portal in Virginia, signing 19 transfers, I like you mentioned, I think it's pay for play at this point. I think it's fairly obvious. As JB and I said, this is what the NCAA wanted. It's the Wild Wild West, and until they come in and do something about it, which I don't think they really can at this point. I think they're kind of powerless. This is what it is. And so Virginia, like you mentioned, with the donors and stuff, are starting to get their, get in the game a little bit, and talk about that a little bit, kind of the difference college football 5 years ago to now, even just how much has changed in the NIL transfer portal recruiting Wild Wild West era it is.
Yeah. Well, let me just first say, I've always felt like players should be compensated somehow.
For sure.
Even when I played, back I was in Virginia from 87 to 92, and my junior and senior year there, we really elevated that program. We went from a program that was just kind of like almost seen as the Stanford of the ACC. It's a huge academic standards school, hard to get into, hard to get those types of athletes in there. And then we just hit a stretch of like 3 years or so where we're always in the top 10 or 15 teams. My junior year, we're number one in the country for about a month. And had our quarterback not gotten hurt, we probably would have been playing Miami for the national championship type of thing, because we were just on that type of roll. And so we had jerseys, stadiums filled, like all this money has been moved. And then we're getting like free lunch. It's like, I came to UVA, man. I had one backpack, one pair of jeans, 2 or 3 shirts, and a pair of shoes. That's all I had. And I was supposed to survive at this university on that. And then people say, well, you get this free education. Well, even the education is limited, so it's like there's only certain classes you can take and certain majors you can have because of your schedule. So I always compare it to if someone sold you a house on the lake and told you you couldn't use the lake, but they're going to charge you the same amount as the other house. It's like, well, no, you can't do that because my house is diminished a little bit because I can't even put my boat in the water, And so it's a little bit like that, before this in college sports where, you can go to these great universities, but man, it's hard to go to UVA and major in engineering, which is one of their big programs there. It's hard to go to UVA and be pre-law and play sports. It's hard to go to UVA and be pre-med and play sports. It's really hard to do. You know what I'm saying? And so you end up taking these sociology, like, random, just, you've been there, like team.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so I've always felt that there should be some type of compensation. And so I'm glad that, and in some places it was happening anyway. Like the nice little handshake after the game full of cash kind of a thing. And so now, like, it's just everybody's doing it and it's legal. And so, like you said earlier, just kind of reeling it in a little bit. And I don't want to put a whole ton of regulations around it, but just reeling it in a little bit so that so there is some time a rhyme or reason to it. And then it is good to hear stuff like you were just saying about Travis sharing, to the NIL to help other players, because to me, that's always been one of the biggest issues. Like if you're just happen to be the starter and you're making millions of dollars and I'm out here blocking for you and I'm getting a free hamburger up the street, it's like, hold on, bro. Like, how is this supposed to work? Like, that's not right. You know what I'm saying? And so it is good to hear. And you hear other stories of guys doing that kind of stuff. So it is kind of the wild, wild west. I don't know that the NCAA can step in and do anything to it, but there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to create the change that's needed so that there's still a thing that is operating, but just not as much gunslinger kind of thing about it.
Right, and it is wild the kind of era we're in with college football. Just hearing the stories from Matt McChesney and those who are in college coaching or dealing in recruiting, the amount of tampering, legalized tampering, literally that goes on, it is just insane. Just the way college football has evolved the last 5 years. I mean, since the last time you and I have even spoken, it is just crazy the way that it has changed. But yeah, I think you have gave a great perspective on it for sure. I don't know if the NCAA is going to be able to step in. We'll see how revenue sharing when that goes into effect, how that affects everything. And Title IX, that ruling and how that's played out, and how now they're not taking it into account. Just everything, the way it's playing out, it's very, very interesting. Before we get out of here, Big Ray, I wanted to kind of show something here. 1998, Steelers versus Lions Thanksgiving coin toss. Can you walk us through this? You're a former Lion and had the chance to do the coin toss.
It was like, hey, boy, were you lying on TV? I'm like, no, Mom, I didn't tell a lie. And she goes, like what it said? They said they got the coin toss wrong. Why didn't you say anything? I said, Mom, it's not my job. And so, but the cool thing though is that if you watch the whole game, we had 2 different turnovers where we intercepted the ball, we picked up a fumble. That one of them we scored on, and both times they ruled them one pass incomplete, and the other one they ruled a non-fumble. So we should have won the game in regulation. Right. And because of those couple bad calls, we ended up going to overtime to win it. And then because of that, I get to see this on Thanksgiving Day every year. It's always in the top five plays. And it's one of my legacies to football is that after this coin toss, you just have to call it in the air. Now you have to call it before they flip it. And that started the very next week after that coin toss. They had an extra referee at the center of the field. You had to call it before he flipped it, and then they flipped it. And that's how it is. That's how it's been now for ever since that.
Damn, man, that's an awesome story, man. Ray, I appreciate you telling that and breaking that down. That is quite the story. I did not know that at all. That's huge, unbelievable, man. I just wanted to get your breakdown on that and kind of show that for the people watching here. Big Ray, I can't thank you enough for joining this Fine Tuesday. This has been a great show, man. It's great catching up and talking to you. For those watching, didn't know I had a chance to play high school football with Ray's son, Price Roberts, currently offensive lineman at Portland State. Shout out to Big Price. He's the man. Big Ray, I can't thank you enough for joining, man. I appreciate you. I'd love to have you on again sometime. And, tell Price what's up and tell him I wish him the best. And, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining.
Well, you got my contact info now. So, let's do this, maybe another time during the off season, and we can probably do it at the preseason, like that kind of stuff. So, anytime you got my contact information, just hit me up.
Absolutely, Big Ray. I appreciate you joining. And, man, enjoy your Tuesday. And for those watching, 9-year NFL veteran, Virginia alum, Big Ray Roberts. Ray, thank you for joining, man. I appreciate you.
Peace out, brother.
All right, peace. Shout out to Big Ray for joining the show, dropping dimes, telling that impressive story. 98 coin toss. That was a hell of a story. I did not know that, so he gave that insight to that. For those watching, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, become a member of the Bailey Price Media Army. Big Ray broke down his opinion on the Seahawks and what is going on in Seattle after they traded DK Metcalf, traded Geno Smith, signed Sam Darnold, re-signed Ernest Jones, among other things as well. We'll be back here on Thursday on Bailey Price Media Live with Super Bowl champion quarterback Sean King, so stay tuned for that show as well. I'll be live tomorrow with Big Matt McChesney on 0 to 60 at 3 p.m. Eastern as well. We got a lot of stuff to break down Colorado football-wise as Colorado's begun spring ball and gear up to for their spring game that they are having, unlike some other programs that are not having their spring game. Big Ray also broke down Virginia football as well as they signed 19 transfers, so stay tuned to that as well. We'll discuss Virginia more in the offseason, whether they can turn around that program and get to a bowl game. But if you're watching, hit that like button, subscribe, and become a member. I'll see you on Thursday. Enjoy the Tuesday. Peace.